Hi, everybody. Welcome to this podcast on exam stress and how to mitigate it. We have with us today Madhumita. She's a clinical psychologist with Manoshanti in Mysuru. Uh, Hi, Madhumita. Welcome to this podcast. How are you doing today?
Hi, sir. I'm good. I'm ready for the podcast.
All right, great. Let's start with a quick introduction, Madhumita. Why don't you introduce yourself for our audience? So what do you do, and just talk about your journey so far in mental health and clinical psychology.
Right. So I've just completed my MPhil from JSS Medical College, and I joined my Manoshanti like about 3 months ago. And my role here is to do therapies and assessment and a fully fledged work. It's been great here, and I'm getting to learn also. Yeah. So it's been a good start for me in my career.
So you're fresh out of college, and so you have been through all the exams and stuff. So you really are well equipped to inform us of how to really handle this, right?
Yeah.
You're more experienced, real time, recent experience. All right.
Exactly. Right out of it.
I know. Okay, so let's get down to a very important topic, right? I mean, we all have been students at some point in our life, right? We've all been through exams, whatever, doesn't matter, medical or engineering or whichever stream you are, and that's something. And the Indian education system is so exam oriented, it's so competitive that whether you admit it or not, like it or not, you kind of, even if you are the best student in your cohort or class, you still have to face that. And that's been an increasing topic, and that's the reason we are having this discussion. So, why has exam stress evolved from an academic challenge into a mental health issue for teenagers today?
Right. So exams have always existed. But what has changed is that something the meaning that is attached to them now. But that change is what that transforms the academic stress into a mental health concern now. Like if you say take a class, about 30 percentage of the students cope well with the stress. About 50 percentage struggle, but they still do cope well with it. And about only 20 percentage find it really very hard, and for them the marks strongly affect their confidence and their emotional well-being. So exams haven't changed, but how students experience them has changed it. And since adolescence is already a period of intense internal changes, like forming self concepts, they're trying to understand themselves, they're trying to see where they fit in this world. In this stage the external evaluation becomes extremely important. Like a good score feels like I did something very good, a validation for them, while a poor score can feel like I'm a failure. And at the same time the competition today is also very high compared to the previous generations, and there are more students competing for limited number of seats in colleges, scholarships and career opportunities. So since the expectations are rising and there is a very small margin of error left for them to do perform, so I feel it has changed from just an academic challenge into a mental health concern nowadays.
Yeah, I think it is a very valid point. So, how did marks or the pressure to achieve high, marks, right, become tied to identity, and what psychological damage does that create?
Yeah, marks have been become tied to identity through constant comparison and repeated talking about what is success. And teenagers today are not just compared inside the classrooms, and they are compared everywhere through social media, through coaching centers, even in casual conversations. And the public discussion about marks and results, it impacts the perform. It's visible everywhere how they are performing. So over time the teenagers they internalize that quite a very strong but dangerous belief that if I don't succeed academically I'm falling behind in life. So when that belief takes over the root, the exam stops being about knowledge, it starts symbolizing who they are, and they have to be accepted in the society, and it questions their future stability also. So, and when something feels very tight to the survival, the brain takes it very strongly. and that creates an overload, and that occupies the fear of disappointing parents, fear of judgment, and fear of lost opportunities, that I'm not able to do few things, and fear of not being good enough, obviously. And all of these fears attach themselves to a very single event, that tomorrow is my exam and I have to very perform very well. And psychologically, this can lead to questioning their self worth, and it can lead to heightened anxiety, self doubt, and emotional exhaustion also. So the pressure intensifies not because the paper is harder, but because the meaning that is carried into the exam hall is very heavy.
Right. I think that's such a very important point. And I mean, as you were mentioning it, I was just recollecting my exam days, and yeah, it's something which pretty much every student faces. Now, let's go under the hood a little. You spoke about the external challenges. Now, what actually happens inside the teenage brain when they perceive exams as a threat? Let's understand it from a neurological perspective.
Right. So when the brain perceives a threat, a structure called amygdala is activated. It constantly asks you one question: am I safe or am I in danger? So when a student perceives exams as a threat, the brain uses the same biological mechanism. Whatever be the threat, if it's a tiger or if it's a mathematics paper, the brain shifts into the survival mode. As the amygdala is activated, the sympathetic nervous system increases the heart rate, stress hormones like your cortisol, your adrenaline increases, and the blood flow shifts towards your muscles slightly, taking you away from your thinking. It's just into action oriented state. So that's why your hands are sweating and your heartbeat is faster, and that's why your thoughts feels too rushed. And it's not weakness, it's about the biology, the neurology, and that's why the body is preparing to run from a tiger, but unfortunately the tiger is a question paper right in front of you.
Well, I know some students would prefer facing a tiger than facing an examination paper. That's that's how it is. But what happens is, and I'm talking with my experience also. You have studied hard, right? You may know the answers to your question, but what happens when you get the question paper, when you go to the exam, early in the morning, and then you have the examiner handing out your question paper. The moment you see the question paper, you suddenly blank out despite knowing the answers. And there's a very
Right.
common thing that happens. Why does it happen? Even
Yeah,
though
even
you may
I
have
face
prepared.
that. Right. Even I face that. So under high stress, the brain temporarily, shifts its resources. So energy moves away from, thinking towards rapidly responding to however the situation is. So that is why, often we say, I remembered it yesterday, but today I forgot it in the exam. And the issue is not memory loss, it's memory access. And there is a reduced communication between a structure in the brain, that is the hippocampus, and the prefrontal cortex. So here the prefrontal cortex helps you organize your thoughts. It holds the information in your brain, in the working memory, and it helps you strategically retrieve the information also. So when the stress is high, the amygdala is overly active. The prefrontal cortex is very less efficient. So the information is stored, but the pathway that is connected to retrieve is disrupted. So that's why even most often we say, I don't remember it in the exam, I'm just blanked out. But when after the exam, it's like I remember it somewhere, something, I remember that page, I remember this content. Because now the threat is gone, our system is calm, so the access returns. So blank out during exams is not about the incompetence, it's about often brain that is functioning under a biochemical strain that is undergoing. So understanding this narrative, it shifts our thinking from self blaming ourselves to self awareness.
Just an offshoot question of this, right? Now, you mentioned interesting that once you leave the examination hall, suddenly everything comes back. Your hippocampus is activated, and amygdala, all the parts of the brain that you mentioned, right? Whatever is working behind the scenes, everything is activated, and you suddenly remember, oh my God, I should have. I remember I have studied this, but then I don't know how. And then it happens, right? When a lot of your friends or your your peers are discussing the question paper and actively, hey, did you answer this? And when you hear them and does it stress you out that, oh my God, I didn't do as much as they did? And they said, hey, I answered. Does it affect your psychology? It's because that's something which it affected me also. I thought I've done good, but when I hear those conversations happening, friends discussing questions, did you answer? And then trying to analyze, review how they did, you said it stresses you out more. My God, I did worse than them. Does it happen?
Right, yeah, it does happen. It happens very naturally because the comparison is not very obvious, but it's in a very subtle way. Like you don't obviously think to how have they done or anything, but it's a very subtle thought. You know, he might have completed 3 chapters. I just did one, and so on. So it just the comparison goes on, and that again, it affects you even without the obvious stress being present.
Right. Now let's go to very important, because today's student, there's one thing which probably we didn't have, at least growing up, is screen time, right? Mobile. So is screen time harmful because of duration or because of how it conditions our attention?
Screen time is not harmful just because it consumes hours. Its deeper impact is how it trains the brain to expect the stimulation that comes from our notifications. Like the modern digital platforms, the Instagram Reels and the YouTube short videos and the rapid scene changes, all of these affect and with an unpredictable rewards, like each notification, like the like, comment, share, is giving a possibility that something is very significant to you, emotionally also, socially also. So over time your brain adapts to it, and it prefers that fast and high intensity input also. And now compare that with studying is very slow, it's very quiet and more effort from our brain. And that conditioned brain, which is to the screen, is now finding it very hard seeing the textbooks are unusually demanding your attention, like too much hard work, too much of time investment. But in screens though, you just need your attention in seconds, and just endless scrolling. So another subtle effect here of screen exposure is boredom. So in previous days when boredom strikes, it's a time for mental reset. It's time for your imagination, your memory integration, imagination, something we used to do. But right now, the moment the boredom appears, most of the teenagers we are reaching our phones. So as a result, your brain receives very few opportunities to reset, and your mental fatigue accumulates, very quietly, and you might even.
Got it. Now, one of the things I've noticed in a lot of today's generation kids studying is, it's a very distracted environment there, and generally they have their phone with them, right? So is studying with a phone nearby, does it neurologically fragment focus, affect it? Because I think we came from where we had undivided focus reading a book, but today it's all iPads and iPhones. It's distracted. People listen to music, or they are multitasking. So does it affect focus?
It actually does affect the focus. The modern habit is, I'll study with my phones nearby, like reading one page and replying to a notification, and then coming back to the page and then replying to a message. So each switch might feel very small. I'm just replying to one message. What will happen? But neurologically, it fragments your attention. The brain must repeatedly reorient itself, and the student is not fully back. A small percentage of attention is still processing inside them about the conversation, about the messages, and about what had happened and what the notification is about. So this repeated switching increases your cognitive fatigue, which means, like, if I study total 3 hours of time, effectively my deep focus is only for 90 minutes. The That makes the student feel I studied all day but nothing went inside my head, because depth was missing, which consumes energy. And by the time exams approach, students are often, more tired than they actually realize. But they think, I studied, but nothing is in my brain now. So that is how the screens, affect the attention.
Another, if I can call it a beast today, is social media. So I know that a lot has been spoken about the effect of social media. Of course, there are some pros, there are some cons to social media, and I think it has been researched enough. Specifically to exams and studies, does comparison on social media increase exam anxiety without any obvious stress, or how does social media play a part, especially in the modern world that we live in? Not maybe not 30, 40 years back we didn't have that. So what do you see? Do you see a difference between how students approach it in the social media world?
There definitely is a big comparison that you can do from previous generations and the current generation. In previous generation, it just like exams are discussed only during when the papers are given. Apparently, like I just got this marks, I passed, I failed, and they'll just leave that conversation to it. But right now, the effect is subtle, but not that much obvious in comparisons. So it always does not look like a full panic, or it does not look like I'm crying and I'm breaking down. Sometimes it looks like a very small thought, like he must have done better, and they are doing mocks every day. The comparison, the social media posts and the stories that every day the kids are sharing through online. So am I doing enough? Even a quick glance of someone's story in preparation, am I doing enough? This constant evaluation keeps the nervous system slightly more alert, and it's not fully panicked, but it's never fully relaxed also. So the brain is constantly scanning like where it stands, and that consumes energy. Over time, this again gives you a mental fatigue. So when exam really arrives, the system is already tired. It's like you're going for a running race after already you walked all day long for like 10 kilometers. You've already walked,
Yeah,
but you've got to run because your exam have come.
correct. Yeah, that's an interesting example. I think that now we come to a very, very important topic, a subtopic, which probably every student would relate to. It doesn't matter which era, which generation it is. How do you, the night before the exam, right? Sleep. And I think it affects everybody. I don't know if, when I was a student, I don't even recall whether nicely slept, a very relaxed sleep, even if I had prepared well for exam, even if I have not. Everybody goes through that anxiety before the morning of the exams. Uh, why is sleep more important than last minute? People study last minute also, right? There's a lot of people who study last minute, don't sleep or during the exam, because most of we are geared to studying last minute, right? I think most students, Indian students, generally start preparing last minute as them to have less time to cover all of the syllabus that is there, curriculum that's there. So, sleeping well before an exam versus last minute studying for exam. Why is good sleep before an exam more important than last minute studying?
So here, like you mentioned, we're not sleeping most often, right? Exam kal hai, so my brain is stuck there. Like tomorrow is the exam, tomorrow is the exam. Rather, I'm not sleeping. So here, sleep actually plays a very critical role in turning what we study into lasting knowledge. So during sleep, the brain is engaged in one of its most important tasks, that is memory consolidation. So when students learn new information during the day, the information is first stored in the temporary memory system that mainly supported by the hippocampus, like we already discussed. So at this stage, the memories are very fragile and they can be easily lost also. The brain does not want the important information to remain in this unstable format. So when sleep is insufficient or disrupted, this consolidation is very inefficient. The learning is remains incomplete and unstable. So entire night if you study also, the document, it's like you're saving a document saved halfway in the software somewhere, I did it, but I'm not sure if I saved it fully or not. So your overnight studying may allow the students to recall information in a very brief manner. Key this page, right column, left brief, so you will able to remember it in a very brief way, but your learning is very fragile there, and it often you forgot it quickly, you forget it very quickly, especially during your exam stress, because you're already preparing your mind for something, you've read something and you're thinking about something else. So it's a very hard time, and we've all experienced it, but these teenagers really are struggling.
So basically, if you use computer terminology, you try and access your mind's memory server, you get a 404 page
Exactly.
link
Error.
not found, page not found problem. All right. So before this, you were mentioning about something called as neural replay. Why is it critical for learning? What is it and why is it critical for learning?
So, neural replay is one of the brain's most powerful learning tools, and it happens while we're sleeping. So, during a deep sleep, like your slow wave sleep, the brain quickly rehearses what we learned during the day. So, the same pattern of the brain activity that occurred while we are studying are replayed inside the brain internally itself. So, like the brain is practicing itself internally, and we are not much aware of it because we're sleeping. And during that neural replay, the information is gradually transferred to a long-term storage access through the cortex. As this happens, the connection between the brain cells becomes very strong, and it's more stable also. So that's why sleep doesn't just help us remember fact, it also helps us bring a clarity, and you connect the ideas and you gain more insight about the concept, like once you understand the concept very well and you've learned it thoroughly. So, without enough deep sleep, your learning stays fragile. And with proper sleep, I can say, your learning is very durable. So, that's why they say sleep of 6 hours is very important for a brain to function during your learning days.
Yeah, I mean, it's a one-off, right? I mean, you could probably get away with it once or twice, but if it becomes a habit, then obviously you're right, it does set you up for long-term damage. Now, one of the other unfortunate habits we have is late night phone usage. I mean, it's not just students, right, or the young generation is everybody probably, even the fathers and grandfathers and grandmothers and mothers are also doing the same thing. It's just the way it is, how we live in the times we live in. But how does late night phone usage damage emotional regulation the next day, especially if you have during exam time?
So, in late night screen use, the blue light that is emitted in the phone, your tablets, your laptops, it delays the release of a hormone called melatonin. So, that melatonin, what it does, it signals your brain that it's time to sleep. So, when you show your screen too much time, it says, it's not time to sleep. The light is still coming. So, I still have time to sleep. So when teenagers, even after they fall asleep, like you've watched your screen, but you've kept it and you've slept, the quality of the sleep is reduced. So with less sleep available, for the memory consolidation, and they sacrifice sleep, they've sacrificed it. The quality is not good. So what they've taken into the next day is the memory circuits are weaker, and because of that your recalling of information is very poor. And now secondly, your emotional reactivity, like how you respond to things, you might have taken time to respond, you might have thought it logically, but since your sleep is very disturbed and you're very disrupted in your mind, emotional reactivity is also heightened here. Yeah, it increases your stress, anxiety and frustration. So, from this compromised state, they are still expected to perform academically, which creates a cycle of poor learning and emotional strain there. So, protecting sleep is a form of cognitive preparation here. So, adequate sleep supports your memory, it gives your emotional balance, and it promotes your academic performance also. But when students prioritizing sleep, it's most of effective and it's scientifically supported strategies also. But most of the time, what we think is, I'll sleep only for 5 hours because I can cover next two chapters. It doesn't work like that. A minimum of 6 hours of good sleep is necessary for these teenagers, and not thinking sleep as waste of time.
Okay, so what realistic boundaries can teenagers set without eliminating screens entirely?
The solution is not extreme discipline or eliminating stress completely. It's not possible. Like, no teenagers can do it. Not even we even did not do it. So, in moderate amounts of stress is part of growth. Like, we've all experienced stress. So, that moderate stress is a part of our growth. But here, the goal is to keep our brain in a healthy balance. Like, that is to keep the brain awake enough to focus, but not very stressed enough to shut it down. So the goal is intentional screen use. If you're using the screen, use it for 30 minutes, 15 minutes, and then keep your phones physically away from you. Like if you're sitting in a room, keep the phone in the another room or in a hall or somewhere that's very distant from you so you don't get distracted. And this is about preventing the overstimulation. And during those times when the brain needs, steadiness, even a small boundary like reducing the screen time before the bed, like I'm not using the screen 1 hour before going to bed, that also helps you. And your study habits also matter, like right now. So instead of studying for a very long time, sitting for like 2 hours and then getting over stressed about it, you can sit for like 40 minutes and then a 10 minutes break. So that can help you, learning happens more naturally, rather than you stressing yourself and parents shouting at you that do not use your screens. It's the thing that's not letting you study.
Now let's come to another important point. I think the role of parents in creating psychological safety instead of pressure. Because see, you need to understand that in India, parents also take as much stress for their child's future, especially the 10th and 12th class board exams, which I think decide the future of millions of
Everybody's come through that.
students across the country. So, any tips for parents? How can they ensure that their child or teen uh, you know, is safe, is feeling calm, and they can provide the right support in during these troubled exam times?
So parents can create emotional safety when they separate the child's performance from who they are actually. Like teenagers perform best when they know that they are being loved, they are being accepted in the family, just not based on these board exam marks. So when effort is acknowledged, not just the outcomes, the brain feels more supported than being judged for what it's been done. So mistakes should be treated as a part of learning. It should be treated, not just a proof of failure. Like I didn't do well. That does not mean I'm a failure. But the parent should stop that constant thing that you didn't do well. You're not good at it. You're not good at it. Instead of that, without the child has to have a safety, like the child should feel safe to say I didn't do well, without the fear or without the anger or without the comparison, that the nervous system it calms down. And that calm brain, it helps you think more clearly, it helps you solve everything in a better way. Now in a teenager who is more frightened, he or she might study harder, but out of fear, and it cannot perform at its best under a constant pressure of the parents also. So here the psychological safety does not mean parents should not have any expectations. There is a small trick here, that parents can communicate their expectation, but in a very supportive manner, that I believe in your ability, I am here to support you, you can try your level best next time, focusing on their progress and not comparing it with the other children or through anywhere, like their progress and how they train their children. So instead of you must prove yourself, you should get 95 percentage, otherwise you're not, you've not done enough. Instead of these sentences, you can just shift your focus, but your intention is still same, like helping your child get a good mark. So that shift can change from pressure to motivation. That's how I see it.
Okay, that's fair enough. I think one of the things that a lot of psychologists say, a lot of gurus say, is that stress cannot be all bad. Right? I remember, I'm a huge cricket fan, and I remember during the 2003 World Cup, Sachin Tendulkar during the India-Pakistan game didn't sleep for 12 days. Apparently, he was so tensed. And he's a legend. He scored thousands of runs in his, scored hundreds before, but he was very tense. So that imagine the stress. And this is an all-time great legend. So we are, and imagine that also when you're say public speaking, right? You go in front of a large audience. There's always that butterflies in your stomach in terms of you have to, and there's a little bit of stress. A little bit of fear is there. So how does actually little amount of stress could be actually beneficial for good performance?
Right. So, since you mentioned you're a cricket fan, I can also say I'm a cricket fan and I'm a fan of Dhoni here. So, here you can imagine Dhoni, who is, he's very famous for this thing that, you have to maintain your calm state in a pressured situation. So, that pressured situation actually helps you perform better. So, our brains are respond to challenge, that if there is no stress at all, I'm not putting in any effort. I'm not cared about it. I'm procrastinating it as long as I can. I'm not focused on what I should do. So when there is no stress, the performance is not there. It's very poor. But when the stress is present, like something powerful here happens, that the brain releases just enough stress hormones to increase the alertness, and that sharpens your attention, and that boosts your motivation, and then you feel focused enough. So, and then you feel engaged, and this optimal zone is where you care enough to try, but not so much that you panic. In that state, your memory works efficiently, your performance is good, and that is the optimum stress. But on the other side, when the stress is too much, is when your brain shuts down. So,
Yeah, I think that's important. A little bit of you call it that flight or flight syndrome, right? I mean, it's always the brain is prepping yourself to fight positively, and I think that's a good thing. It's always it means that you're ready to you want to excel and perform. So I think you're the right thing. Now let's go beyond exam, and I mean there are people who are questioning the examination system itself. Of course, you and me are not here to debate. That's a separate topic in itself. Is how fair the education system is, and is it something? But if academics are not the only measure of ability, how would society redefine success for teenagers? I think that a lot of people. I remember. I also watch Veer Das, who is a very popular stand-up comic, and he had a few year back or so, a few months back, maybe a little longer than that, he had recorded a very nice story about exams and don't take exam stress, and he said that he also failed and he also had, but it was a very very nicely creative, very nice message that he had given about. So is it that exams itself define and how do we actually redefine success for teenagers, saying that okay, exams are not the end of the world?
so academics are not just a measure of, not the only way to measure the ability of the teenagers. So, many of us have strength in sports, arts, music, leadership, communication skills, technical skills. So, when these abilities are identified by the parents or teachers or whoever is nearby, and whoever is, when they are encouraged, the confidence becomes more balanced, and it's very less dependent only on the marks. So, if a teenager is genuinely not interested in academics but shows clear talent and commitment in another area, it's important to explore that and have alternative plans and career pathways instead of just focusing on those marks. And you know, parents do define our success just towards marks, like you score well, you study well, you go sit in this position, your life is settled. But not everybody's brains function like that, it's not set like that. So having multiple option, it reduces that fear. So when life is built around only one outcome is when not achieving them feels very stressful. But when there are different pathways, when there are different options kept in front of them, they're actually ready to try out, and that setbacks, that redirects, rather than it sounds like an ending, that I'm a failure, rather than that. Yeah, like you said, the culture should, the shift we need is from the culture, not just the education system also, because the brain is an adaptive, it's very intelligent system, it logically responds to the environment we create. So when we create support, when we create balance, the rest, ambition, compassion, it also, everything follows behind. So it's not just the academics that everyone should focus. It's again about the talents that the teenagers have.
Yeah, I think that's a very long discussion in itself about uh, can you become successful without uh, going through the rigors of the current examination or academic rigor and program that has there been there for years. Of course, we live in a system where academics matter, but I think the current world people have can still aspire to be successful. Of course, you need to. It's not about marks. It's really about what you gain and skills you gain, and skills are more important. But anyways, uh, thank you very much, Madhumita. I think there's some great insights on how students can cope with stress and become not just that, but the broader picture and how to overcome it. And it's good to have a little bit of stress as well. It was very informative. I'm sure a lot of people preparing for the exams and exam season is coming up will be very find it very useful. Thank you again, and great having you here.
Thank you.
So, all right, have a great rest of the day, and Thank you very much. Bye.